Welcome to Tales from the 90s, your nostalgic look back at everything 1990s. This week we got a lot to talk about, so make sure you order yourself a pizza. Remember, after 30 minutes it's free, and we'll get into the podcast.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Yeah, like I said, we got a lot to talk about this week, and that pizza reference was, of course, that was a big thing from the 90s. You order a pizza, and if it's not there in 30, I think it was Domino's that started it, but other companies took it on that if you didn't get it in the first 30 minutes, it's free. Famous scene from the Turtles movie, which is not a so subtle segue into our first part. But before we get into that, I hope you guys like the podcast, whether you're watching here on YouTube, Facebook, or listen to us on Spotify. By the time this comes out, you'll hopefully have seen or heard my bonus episode, just kind of journeying through my 9.5 years in wrestling. If wrestling's not your thing, then, or if you don't know me personally, you probably will want to skip that one, and that's fine. I mean, some of these episodes won't be for everybody. But this week, we're going back, way back, furthest we've been so far in our journey. It's going to be June 1990. And as always, you may hear the air conditioner kick on. You may hear the dogs go nuts. There's kids outside screaming, so the dogs think that they're trying to break in here or something. I don't know. But yeah, we're going back to June 1990. This time I would have been 6 years old in second grade. I didn't turn 7 till the end of that year, but yeah, this is the earliest we've been. And like I was talking about the Turtles were everywhere this time. Of course, the 1987, I mean, it started with the comic books and everything. I'm not going to give a whole history of the Turtles, but it started there. But the huge explosion into just pop culture for the Turtles came with that 1987 cartoon series. And it was still going on at this time, but they started to branch out more. Of course, all those classic toys I talked about on our bonus episode about toys. You can check that one out too. But around this time, it was a couple months before this, in March, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie came out. New Line Cinema. That's just a classic movie. I can't remember whether that pizza joke came from that movie or the second one, Secret of the Ooze, where he waits until it's free. Or yeah, he's in the sewer. I'm confusing that with Leprechaun, where Morty waits for the pizza. He waits 1 minute past and opens the door and says it's free. I'm confusing movies here. Not talking about the Leprechaun, although we are talking about green things, 4 of them. All that to say, like I said, the movie came out and was huge with adults, kids, everybody. That movie hit perfectly. But I'll talk more about that actual movie whenever I go back to March of 1990. Right now, we're here to talk about, probably known as the stepchild of the Turtles franchise. You either love this it's not even a movie, love this creation and all its cheesiness, or you absolutely hate it. I'm talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Coming Out of Our Shells tour. And you can guess which side I'm on. Me and my brother Josh, and then later Travis, and I don't remember if we got Clint into it because we might not have had the tape at that point, but this is a backstory on this. This is the Turtles singing in concert. This is exactly what it sounds like. They went on a tour. They put out everything. There was a tape that came out from Pizza Hut. Had that, an audio tape, cassette tape, for us old people that know what those are. They had all the songs, the studio versions, and then there was the live tour, which sadly I didn't get to see. But then their first performance from Radio City Music Hall in New York, they had a huge press conference and everything. There's actually behind the scenes of the tour tape I have. That's how much of a dork I am. But they put that show out on pay-per-view, and my mom got it for us and taped it. Of course, we know you're not supposed to tape stuff off pay-per-view. I'm pretty sure they're not going to come after my mom from something from 1990 that we don't even have anymore. But by the way, you can watch this show on YouTube. You can order it off Amazon if you want to get the tapes. Probably get it on bootleg DVDs, Blu-ray somewhere. But anyway, yeah, it was the Turtles having their concert. Splinter convinced them that they could do more with their music than with nunchucks or a sword, as their message there. It was music with a message. They were trying to teach it. Not supposed to be fighting, yet they're Ninja Turtles, and they're still fighting on their cartoon in the movie. But anyway, it was a wholesome thing. But of course, it wasn't just a concert. It was a whole production. Shredder showed up, trying to take over the music because he I can't tell any of the stuff without laughing. Shredder hates music, but yet he raps. Yes, the Shredder raps with these fake giant eyelashes drawn on or painted on or something about how he hates. I hate music. And it's like a sign of the time. You want a New Kids on the Block album? And throws it in the garbage can. Anyway, his plan is with this machine that Baxter Stockman had, and this dork shows up playing Baxter Stockman. But they're gonna take over the Turtles. They're gonna get rid of the music, make them not be able to sing anymore, and take away all the music in the world. That was his big plan. Not. He has the Turtles like frozen for a while. He could have just killed them, but no, he's gonna take away the music in the world. That'll show them. Doggies, quit fighting, or I'll put on the Turtles. But just there are some actual good songs on there. The first song was "Coming Out of Our Shells," one of my favorites. I think my favorite one, is "You Can Count on Us," the closing one, because of course they defeat the Shredder. But for a while they take away April O'Neil's voice, or her song in there is really good too. I don't like the version on the tape. The studio version, whoever they got to do her song, she was horrible. The one they had live could sing. She was good. But there's a song called "Walk Straight," and everybody thinks that is the Turtles telling everybody they need to be straight. It's just about being straight, like as far as like doing things the right way. It has nothing to do with any kind of preferences or anything like that. But people have played it now like, oh, the Turtles were saying you shouldn't be. No, the Turtles are not. But then they had one where they were surfing for some reason, and they had alligators wearing coconut bras on the stage. Pizza Power was another one of their famous ones. I think they used the Pizza Power theme in one of the Turtles video games. But they had pizza delivery guys, and of course Shredder had his Foot Clan. But the song, or infamous song, is Splinter singing. Yes, Splinter singing. Some song about skipping stones for some damn reason. And just, I'm skipping stones. Of course, I made my own parody later on because the guy sounds like he's trying to pass a kidney stone. So, it's kidney stones. That's a whole thing if you want to check it out on my Facebook. But anyway, there's a difference between the pay-per-view broadcast and the one they put out on home video. The pay-per-view had an intermission, of course, because it was live when they did it. It wasn't just like a tape thing. So, of course, these type of live shows have intermissions. They showed this weird thing at intermission that they didn't show on the video. Like, it was like telling you to save the planet, but it was like turning the planet into a hamburger and a face, and then at the end it like died, and it's like that's the image you're left with as you go back to intermission. Like, keep it up, people, and we're all gonna be dead. Nice message for the kids. I mean, I get what they were doing, but yeah, the Turtles at one point get their music taken away, their instruments won't work, and they end up finding out that they just sing, they can get over this, and April got her voice back, and they defeated Shredder and sent him in some portal. But man, we wore that tape out, and I got a tape of it for when I had my own kids, and we wore that tape out too. I remember with the kids dancing around in their room like we had just watched it, and I just decided to start doing the Splinter voice. And at this point, he like spins around in this song. So we're all spinning around the room, making ourselves dizzy. The top of our lungs probably pissing off the neighbors. Doing, I'm skipping stones. Sounds like freaking Bruce Springsteen, like with throat cancer or something singing. But anyway, yeah, so many memories of that. Definitely check that out on YouTube. And it's funny to watch people's reaction and reviews to this, even the ones that hated it. It's funny with them going off at it, because it's like you get their point. It is cheesy, it's probably bad, but man, I love that. But I want to make this the whole thing about that. But the tour actually started a month after this. But sorry, I was just waiting to jump the gun to talk about this show. At one point, they're playing Jeopardy with Michelangelo, and it's obvious they ain't playing these instruments or singing. And when they show them backstage, because like I said, they had this dorky reporter. I don't know. I don't think it was the same guy as Supermarket Sweep, if you remember that game show. But it looked like him, if it wasn't the same guy. But he was running around, he called the Turtles a weenie, and he got killed by Shredder at one point. But, just watch it. That's all I gotta say, just watch it. But actually, we're gonna talk about the Turtles a little bit more, because I'm gonna go into video games. And believe it or not, at this time, a huge part of the video game, because we hadn't yet entered the huge console wars of Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis had come out first. You know, they got a jump on the 16-bit games ahead of Nintendo, which would come out with the Super Nintendo. And home video games were a thing, and they were popular, but the arcades were still... I don't know if they were #1 video game sellers, but they were still huge, because, I mean, before we had these... People today can't realize with the, with the PS5 and all this stuff, just how different it was video game-wise. Like, you wanted to play video games, and you wanted to play good video games, you were going to the arcades. Now, that was a little bit before my time. The only time I got to experience arcades really is at the laundromat, or a couple times going to different arcades, but I never got to experience that heyday. I wish I could go back and do that. That had to have been some fun stuff. But anyway, the #1 game was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, because, I mean, they were everywhere. And that's not the same first Turtles game as came out on Nintendo. It eventually did come out on console, but it was called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Arcade. Yes, I'm drinking Faygo. No, I don't like the clowns. Anyway, that's another thing. But yeah, that was the #1 arcade game. Of course, WrestleMania, the arcade game, which would later come out on all the consoles. One of my favorite wrestling games of all time, no matter how cheesy it was. But that wasn't even out then. Made me think of it. I ramble a lot here, as you can tell. I have an outline, but sometimes these things get off the rails. But, yeah, like I said, home consoles were out. We had the original Nintendo, which is 8-bit, of course, and then the Sega Master System, which was the precursor to Sega Genesis. It was on its last legs, and they came out with the Sega Genesis, which was 16-bit, which gives you, double the power, as they called it. But the best-selling games were still for Nintendo, because Sega Genesis had just started. It hadn't hit the peak that it would hit. But the #1 selling game was Super Mario Bros. 3 for Nintendo, which, can't say enough about that one. My wife's favorite game, by the way. The raccoon suit and just the way it played, it really was a precursor to the next big Super Mario Bros. Game for Super Nintendo, which would be Super Mario World. But my favorite Mario collection of all time has got to be that Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World. I mean, they took the original 3 games and the so-called lost levels plus Super Mario World. I mean, talk about value there. And they remastered for that time. But if you look at the graphics, they're completely different. They made it the 16-bit graphics, which increased like everything on it, but they left the game alone as far as like how it played. But a quick history of that. My favorite Mario game of all time, Super Mario 2, which I know is Super Doki Panic, or Super Doki Doki Panic, something like that. Anyway, it was originally going to be a Mario game, but they turned it into this other game, with the characters. But then, and then they created Mario 2 for Japan. Well, Nintendo USA didn't want to release that game because it was way too hard. Some of you probably know the story. It was way too hard, and trust me, those levels are hard. I eventually played it later on, but on Wii U, where you could actually save, like, at certain points in the game, so you could like go back to right before you died and have your lives still. You need a cheat code with that game. Game Genie. But anyway, it was too hard, so they took the Super Doki Doki Panic, which I said was originally gonna be a Mario title, and they just swapped out the characters for Mario characters. And you could play as the princess, you could play as Toad, and they all had their different abilities. You know, Luigi had those high jumps, the princess could float. But anyway, and when they did release that Mario 2 from Japan, it became known as the Lost Levels and was bundled with all that. Anyway, that's a lot to say. The Super Mario Bros. 3, which has nothing to do with those other games, was the #1 selling game. Like I said, we get off the rails here. I just like to talk about things I remember. It's the whole point of this. I mean, I make up the formats so I can break the formats. Anyway, I can break the formats, but I can't talk. But the #1 selling game for Game Boy, which was the Nintendo's handheld, that was becoming hugely popular around this time, was Tetris, of course. Classic game. It'll be looked at as simple these days. You got to match up the blocks. You got to try to clear each level. I was good for a couple levels. My wife again, this was her year. Mario 3 and Tetris, those were her games. But that's a little look at the video games. I want to go into the music world now. As I've said before, I definitely was not listening to anything but country, especially in 1990. But I'll give a rundown of some of the stuff that was popular then, because it might trigger some memories you guys. The Billboard Hot 100, not the tape. If you watched last week's podcast, not the tape Travis and Josh put on, but the countdown. The first week of June, and it had been #1 2 weeks prior also, is Madonna's Vogue. The thing where I don't know. I just did a freaking horrible Madonna impression. What am I doing with my life? But anyway, I've never listened. I don't think I've ever even heard a Madonna song all the way through, honestly. But how could you not talk about the 90s without talking about her? Wilson Phillips, Hold On. I think I've heard the song. Was #1 the next week. And then the week after that, for 2 weeks, was Roxette. I've never heard of Roxette, but I'm guessing it's a woman. It Must Have Been Love was the song. You're probably going to kill me like, how do you not know this song? Like I said, I didn't listen to it, and some of the stuff I've listened to since then, but a lot of this early 90s stuff I didn't really. I started getting into more pop stuff around the late 90s. But then the last week of the month would be #1 New Kids on the Block, Step by Step. Of course, New Kids on the Block, like I was talking about in the Turtles, they were pop culture huge. One of my wife's favorites. I should have had her on for this podcast. But it went to #1 for 3 or 2 weeks after that. But my music, the American Country Music Countdown, Ricky Van Shelton, I've Cried My Last Tear for You. Well, that's a classic song. Ricky Van Shelton is one of those ones that went away after the early 90s, but he'd had this knack for taking older songs. Like I think this is a newer song. But he took these older songs from like the 60s and would sing them, change them that much, but his voice was just so good that people today's like, yeah, that's a new song, and they liked it. He had so many #1s, and he didn't last long into the 90s, of course, with music trending the way it did. Next up is the song that would be #1 for 4 weeks, and actually a week into July, was the massive George Strait "Love Without End, Amen." I mean, that was like, for anybody else that would be a career song, that would be like the song they remember for the most, but George Strait is just like, oh, just another great song, and that's not a knock on him, and he's had so many songs that other artists would like die for, that could make a career out of, and he was just putting them out one after the other, and he always gets the knock that, oh, he didn't write all this stuff. Well, it doesn't matter. That's why songwriters exist in Nashville and anywhere else, any other kind of music. Not every artist has to write everything. Trust me, it took me forever to write stuff on my own stuff, and to be even halfway, I wouldn't even consider it good, because I'm a huge critic of myself, but it is hard to write a song. Especially with, I mean, the only reason I've been able to actually write songs recently is because I've found, like, backing music. But, I mean, you got to think about all that. You got to think of the way the music goes with it. But, I've heard some of the George Strait songs he's actually written. They're not bad. I think they're really good. It's just he knew how to pick the right writers. And a lot of people give him, like, oh, you can't be the best in country if you didn't write your own. Whatever. You know, it's all subjective, but you go through George Strait's catalog. I don't care if Bob Dole wrote them. There's a 90s reference for you. They're good songs, and they're made even better by his singing and the right instruments, the right background vocals. George Strait, and you went to see him in concert, and he just stands there and sings, and that's literally all you need. I mean, Garth Brooks is known for his shows, and I think he's my number one guy of all time in music, any genre, anything. But I could watch that, and I can watch Garth Brooks jump around like crazy, literally fly through the air, be shot out of cannons, and or I can just listen to George Strait just stand there and sing. I mean, that's the great thing about country, and the thing that I think has gone downhill these days is it's always been diverse, but it's always been at the heart of it. It's been the music, like the solid country themes, and I'm not talking about the sitting on your tailgate and girls with their shirts off and whatever the hell they sing about these days. I don't even know, as you can tell. And it doesn't have to be about living in the country. I mean, it's just about everyday life. And now it's just all a bunch of rappers that, hey, we're not making it in rap, let's go to country. So, there's that. Gonna leave it at that. Album releases the month of June were Pirates of the Mississippi, their first album. They didn't last long. They had a song called Feed Jake. It was really ahead of its time. Might have been too ahead of its time, because there was, as good as country music was in the 90s, there's a lot of times where they just didn't let certain themes go when they really should have. They should have been more progressive. They would have gotten even more fans. But anyway, it took on some themes about homelessness and just other stuff. Anyway, ahead of its time. It's probably why they didn't last long. And then type this one down. I almost wrote this down like I was writing it. Mariah Carey's first album came out. The only reason I put that on there is because as I'm recording this, we're in the middle of November, and yes, she's been awakened from her sleep to sing that Christmas song that we all just love. I've actually only heard it once so far, but if I hear it anymore, I'm skipping if it's anything I can skip. But finally get to talk about something I haven't been able to talk about the last couple weeks, because I've been in I've been in 98. But that's my old friend Tales from the Crypt right here. Season 2 had wrapped up, but they were showing, or not, no it hadn't. Well, obviously they had wrapped up filming it, but yeah, Season 2 was actually on the air during this time. I got my things confused. And they were, like I said, Season 1 set the stage, but Season 2 and 3 are known as the best, and the episodes that aired in this month are just some really good episodes that had really different, themes, but all, they all definitely have a monster theme. The first one was I can't talk. I'm going to get me a drink. The first one was a ventriloquist dummy. This is a crazy one. Had Don Rickles in it, a classic actor. He ended up he was a comedian, and then his career was ended by this fire. And later on, he's at this comedy club, and this comedian was there, and he wanted his opinion on it because the guy was his hero. Because the guy had been ventriloquist, as I said, and his dummy name was Morty, and yeah, he went to see this young comedian at the club, and he told him, oh, you need to work on this, and it kind of just killed the guy. So the guy went to see him later on, and anyway, I don't want to give the whole plot here, But it turns out that Morty actually isn't a dummy. It's his twin brother that's like stuck to his hand and is like making him commit crimes. That's why he had to quit. And he like injected stuff into his hand to keep Morty like basically sleeping the whole time. But Morty's back awake and ends up cutting it off his hand, and like Morty like infuses himself in the young comedian's hand and is like controlling him on stage, and the face is so creepy. Definitely one that's one of the crazier episodes of Tales from the Crypt. Even my dogs like it. The next one is called, in the Crypt Keeper voice, Judy, you're not yourself today. The Crypt Keeper voice always gets the dogs. That's a horrible impression, by the way. But Judy, you're not yourself today is about this couple, this weird couple. This guy's like obsessed with guns. This woman's like rich and always caring about her face. Anyway, this old witch stops by, who's like selling cosmetics, is really just trying to find another body because she's about to rot away. And she ends up switching places with this woman. And they end up... Carlos is here. You like this tale, don't you, loose boy? But she ends up switching bodies, and the guy kills the witch and puts her in the basement, but she uses the emerald thing that switches bodies to come back that they had in their safe, and it's a really weird episode, but it's creepy too. The next one's one of those just classic Tales from the Crypt episodes called Fitting Punishment, about this guy that goes to stay with his uncle Ezra, who runs a funeral parlor, and he's an evil guy. He's mean to his employees, like hits them, and he's a cheapskate with his coffins. And like this young boy, it was his uncle, the guy's mom, the kid's mom, the guy's sister, dies, so he has to go stay with him, and he's like, okay, and he makes him sleep on this like one of them trays with a blanket that they put the dead bodies on with a blanket, and he's not doing things right according to the funeral guy, and always leaving his basketball around. So anyway, the guy makes him trip, fall down the steps, and he's like paralyzed and useless to him. So anyway, he has this coffin that he couldn't use because it was the wrong coffin. Of course, he blamed his other employee on that. So he's like, well, I'll just kill him and put him in the coffin. Well, it turns out he's too tall for the coffin, so he has to cut his legs off. So you can guess what happens. He gets a little visit from his nephew without his legs. And of course, Uncle Ezra is no more. Definitely check out these. They're all on YouTube, by the way. You can check them out. It sucks that they haven't found a streaming place, but in a way it's good because we can all watch them for free. But the last one is just insane. It's called Corman's Calamity. It's like a Tales from the Crypt themed episode because it's the guy's writing from Tales from the Crypt comic book, and he's got this overbearing is too light of a word to call his wife. She is like insanely overbearing, and he's supposed to be taking these pills to make him fertile because she wants a baby. Why he would even be with this woman, I don't know, but apparently it's making his imagination fertile too, because when he's on these pills, anything he draws comes to life. So all these monsters are all over the city, and he eventually ends up drawing a monster version of his wife to take her out, and then ends up being with this police woman who was actually witness to one of the monster attacks and figured out he was drawing it. But it was insane. Like, these are some really good episodes of Tales from the Crypt in Season 2. Like I said, check these all out. We're going to go into movies. There's actually some movies that I know this month. I know that's kind of a theme where, like, I go through the movies like, ain't heard of that one, ain't heard of that one. Total Recall, I've heard of it, I've never watched it. This one I've never heard of, but I had to look it up. Frankenhooker. It's Frankenhooker. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's like scientist guy. Carlos, Frankenhooker's not at the door. I hope not. The scientist guy, his fiance or girlfriend dies, and he decides to bring her back, but I guess her body was mangled up or something, so he uses the bodies of New York prostitutes. This is a movie I'm gonna have to watch because it sounds just so horrible that it'd be hilarious. Another 48 Hours. I've never seen that, or 48 Hours. I've got to see those. But one that came, or these four that came out, I have plenty of history with. Dick Tracy. That's a classic 90s movie. I've talked about that before on the toys, about getting the Dick Tracy watch from Burger King and wondering why I couldn't talk to people in it. Of course, nowadays, smartwatches. But, yeah, Dick Tracy was like set in the, I don't even know, 20s, 30s, 40s, back in that time period, where he's a detective and all these, like, exaggerated villains. Warren Beatty plays Dick Tracy, and Madonna's in it as well. Speaking of Madonna, I mean, that's how huge she was in the 90s. But, yeah, just those classic not monsters, but movie villains, like, exaggerated. Like, it was cheesy as can be, but I love that movie. I remember watching it with my mom. So I should probably talk I'll talk a little bit about where I was living in a little bit, but at my granny's house, we would watch. I remember two core memories around this. Well, it was a little bit. Yeah, it was around this time. Was watching Dick Tracy. I guess she must have rented it, or it maybe. Yeah, because it couldn't have came on cable yet. I don't know. Maybe it came on HBO. I'm sure my granny probably had HBO then. And watching Roseanne with her every week, it would come on. Those are memories. Me, her, and Josh just sitting there in bed watching Roseanne before I went to bed and went to school in the morning. Back when the time we were living with my granny. Yeah, I know Roseanne has nothing to do with Dick Tracy, but it just unlocks a memory, as they say. Unlock the core memory. Gremlins 2, the new batch. And that was... Gremlins, like, exploded. I don't think they even thought it was going to be as popular as it was, but they came out with Gremlins 2, the new batch, and just the cameos from everybody. Hulk Hogan was a cameo in this during, like, the movie scene. But they went... There seems to be a theme of this. They went nuts with this. The Gremlins just were going even more insane. They were just doing basically anything they could think to do in this movie. It's definitely a funny movie. The Adventures of Milo and Otis, about the dog and the cat that go on adventures. I had to look that up but I know I've seen it a few times. It's just been forever. It's just one of those, sort of like a Homeward Bound type movie. Just one of those heartwarming movies with animals where they go on these adventures together. And then Days of Thunder, I've never actually seen, but my memory with Days of Thunder is not the movie itself, which I know is a Tom Cruise NASCAR movie, but is actually, the memories of it come from, lost my train of thought there. Memories come from Kings Island. I talked a little bit about my trip to Kings Island before when I was talking about the Outer Limits Flight of Fear. Well, one of their things they had was in this, the movie theater type setting where you sit and watch the movie, but you sit in these seats and they would move. Well, they had scenes from Days of Thunder on. So you would be in there, and I believe they had helmets. Because they would change the theme of this often. But when I went, it was Days of Thunder. And you'd be like you're in a race car and it's moving around. It was really fun. Nowadays, it'd probably make me throw up. But, yeah, I should definitely check out some of those movies I haven't seen yet, including Frankenhooker. But, we're going to get into one of our popular segments here, if anybody's watching it, it's popular. Nickelodeon schedule. Sometimes I flop back and forth whether I want to do the Nickelodeon schedule or Saturday morning cartoons. This week I'm going to take a look at Nickelodeon's weekday schedule during this time. This would be the summer of 1990. And just look to see what's on there. And I haven't looked at these ahead of time, because I want to just get reactions. And I know I'm taking forever here, but I'm going to try to move along and not talk about everything. But the summer of 1990, we start at 6 in the morning with Lassie. I've talked about that before. I always remember that on early morning. Classic reruns of that show. Just a great way to start your day, watching something like that. And then Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. Never heard of that. Oh, then at 7 o'clock, which I remember later being on at 6 o'clock, Mr. Wizard. Now, most of the people from the 90s have their Bill Nye the Science Guy. Mine was Mr. Wizard. He would host these shows where he would just do science things and all this stuff and have kids on as, I guess, as guests or whatever. but it was really educational, but he made it really, like, entertaining. Like I said, it wasn't crazy like Bill Nye the Science Guy. It was probably made for older kids or something, but I loved Mr. Wizard. Like, if someone says to me, like, a kid's science show from the 90s, right there, Mr. Wizard, my number one. Inspector Gadget would come on at 7:30. Talked about that last week. Classic cartoon. Dr. Claw and idiot Inspector Gadget and that idiot chief with the self-destructing notes. Anyway, there's one of my favorite cartoons of all time at 8 o'clock. Heathcliff. Again, sort of like you think of, and it was reruns then, but you say 80s, 90s cartoon, Orange Cat, you'd be like, Garfield. Yeah, I think of Garfield too, but my number one is Heathcliff, and I don't even remember if he's orange. Who knows? It's been forever since I've seen it. They need to put Heathcliff on something so I can watch it soon. But yeah, Heathcliff was like this alley cat and all these other... He'd always have the bullies out there and just great cartoon. Pinwheel I've never seen. I know Nickelodeon used to be called Pinwheel before it was called Nickelodeon. I've never seen Pinwheel. I have to look into that. 9 a.m. Today's Special. Never heard of it. This is Nick Jr. I didn't realize I had Nick Jr. in 1990. I've never seen Today's Special or Maya the Bee. Oh, but there we go. 10 o'clock to 11. Eureka's Castle. Now you talk about classic. This is about this like music box castle that it opens up and you see into their world. There's Batley the Bat, and it's Eureka's Castle, and then just so many, Magellan the Dragon. My daughter Ari absolutely hated the show. I showed it to her once. She's like, "What is this?" I said, "It's classic TV. Watch it." She didn't like it, but I love it. Sharon Lois and Bram's Elephant Show. This was like a variety show. I remember watching this all the time. But just like I said, a variety show, but for kids. But the one song they always sung at the end, "Skinnamarink dinky dink, skinnamarink doo, I love you." I'm done now. I promise. Fred Penner's Place. I remember that a little bit. It's kind of like the Elephant Show and like a variety, but it's more. It's, you know, obviously different. These are all Nick Jr. like preschool, kindergarten age, but a lot of them older kids could watch too. The World of David the Gnome. I talked about this when we talked about the toys. So much that theme song pops into my head automatically. I love that cartoon, The World of David the Gnome. I didn't realize how old it was, that it was in reruns, because it seemed like a new show, a new cartoon. David the Gnome and his wife, and the fox Swift would take them everywhere, and they'd have to run away and try to outsmart the trolls that were always trying to eat the gnomes. And so many lessons. A lot of this stuff had a lot of lessons in it that, seeped into you. They weren't like my problem with some of today's Disney and Nickelodeon stuff is you can tell they're trying to shove a message down your throat. And I'm not getting into like, woke this or nothing. I'm not talking about that type of stuff. I'm just talking about whatever message a show has. It wants to shove it down your throat and make you aware. This is a message show and we're giving you this. Back then they just, it was in the story. Even when they like Captain Planet, for instance, they would, there'd be the bumper at the end where like, you can do your part to take care of this. Even when they did that, it didn't feel like they were preaching to you. But just another difference between now and then. I'm sure kids watching and shows in 20 years, the people watching today's Nickelodeon and stuff will be like, you don't know how good we had it. And, time marches on, as the song says. Adventures of Little Koala. I don't remember that. I remember Little Bear. I don't remember Adventures of Little Koala. Or Noozles. Pinwheel's on again. Now we're back in regular Nickelodeon. Today's Special on again. Whatever that was. I wonder if that was like a news thing, like the Nick News later on. I don't know. Then we'd have Lassie again. And then Super Sloppy Double Dare. Because as if Double Dare couldn't get sloppy enough, there was a time period where they were having Super Sloppy Double Dare, where they were making everything like extra messy. I don't remember how long that one lasts, but of course Double Dare is classic. Mr. Wizard again. Heathcliff again. Think Fast. Don't remember that one, and Don't Just Sit There. I think I remember the names, but like 1990, some of the stuff you don't remember as well as other ones. But Think Fast and Don't Just Sit There. They seem like game shows. I'm going to look into those because those might be fun. And then at 5:30 we had Inspector Gadget. And then 6 p.m. you can't do that on television, which was one of the earliest Nickelodeon shows. I always remember the bit they had. The guy would like be in like a firing squad, and during this time it was during the Iraq War, but I think the show was made before then. But the guy looked like he was from Iraq, so I'm sure it would get banned today. But he was like trying to execute this kid. Again, it's called You Can't Do That on Television. And the kid would keep coming up with excuses not to get executed. And I know this is where the Nickelodeon Slime originally came from, as this show. I wish we could see episodes of this reruns today. Make the Grade was next. Don't know that one. Dennis the Menace, I love that cartoon. Of course, everybody thinks of Dennis the Menace. They probably think of the older 60s show or the 90s movie with Walter Matthau as Mr. Wilson. But the cartoon, I love that cartoon. Dennis is always getting into trouble. Of course, gotta have it. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Yet another Looney Tunes. But at least it's just called Looney Tunes. And then back then, Nick at Night started at 8. There was no, 8 o'clock, kids, you're done. And they don't have like the Nick at Night schedule on here. But yeah, that was a look at Nickelodeon's block of TV during the summer, like weekdays. Now we're going to look at TGIF, which is on ABC. That was their Friday night programming block. And this is, talking about TV during this time is kind of hard because it was the summer season, so everything was reruns. It wasn't the new episodes. They would be coming soon. But during this time we had Full House, classic show. I never watched it as much. It's probably going to shock a lot of people. I never really was a fan of Full House. Not that I had something against it. It never interested me enough to watch. But of course I know all about it. We'll be talking about Bob Saget a little bit later on. Of course he was the father on there. But Family Matters. Now there's one with Urkel. I've talked about it before. Staple of TGIF. Family Matters. And we had Perfect Strangers. I've heard of that but never watched it. And then Free Spirit. I think they only lasted a season. I never watched them either. But like I've said before, my main TGIF is Boy Meets World, Step by Step later on. And we'll be getting into more of the stuff because I see on here, just looking at the whole list, Dinosaurs. I got to talk about that show at some point. And like I said, Step by Step. But I don't think I was even watching TGIF at this time. But I still like to give the information just in case some of you were. There might be some that are older than me that this is their core time. My core time is like the mid-90s. I guess if you consider something a core time is like the time you remember the most. The time like I said, I was 7 at this start. Yeah, was it 7? No, I was 6. Sorry, I had that wrong from the start. I was turning 7. Again, my weird birthday is at the end of the year, so when I'm looking at the days, I already said at the beginning of the show I was 7. I was 6, turning 7. I was in 2nd grade, though. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit because I won't really have the opportunity to talk about this because this happened in the 80s. But I figure, beginning of the decade, I can talk about it now. It was just some memories of early life of living with my dad. My mom and dad got divorced. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, it's not for this podcast to debate why this happened. I'm just giving an outline of what happened. And I wish, of course, people always wish their parents would stay together. If both their parents are good parents. But as time gone by, I'm like, well, if that would have happened, my parents would have stayed together. I wouldn't have had 3 brothers and 2 younger sisters. So as much as that would have been great, and we, could have had the family together, that's why you can't go back in time to change things because there's too many variables. Like if time travel was a real thing and you could change things, if you haven't seen The Butterfly Effect, that's a great movie. I'm off on tangents here, but like I said, they had gotten divorced at some point. But I remember when I was where I was living at originally, like earliest years of my life was Warsaw Avenue and Price Hill, and I have some memories of many memories of that place. That whole corner there was called like St. Lawrence because they had St. Lawrence Church and they had the St. Lawrence Flower Shop. It was like this 3-story. The first story was a flower shop, and it wasn't owned by us. It was owned by somebody else, the landlord, I guess. The second floor was the living space. It was where my Grandpa Wally and Grandma Lois and Uncle Dan. I was trying to remember exactly if Uncle Dan lived there. Yeah, during the time I'm thinking of, he lived there, and they lived on that. I don't remember how many bedrooms were there, but I remember there's a main TV room. One of my earliest memories of Nintendo was playing my favorite game, Super Mario 2, on my grandma's Nintendo. Grandma Lois, she would, she was old, but she was playing Nintendo. You don't see a lot of like 50, 60-year-olds playing current video game system these days. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. Times have changed, but she was always playing that Nintendo, and I would sneak up at night and play it like early in the morning when I got it. Not because I wasn't allowed to, because during the day she was always on it. It was my only time getting to play it. But yeah, they lived there, and then me and my mom and my dad lived on the very top floor, which I believe was like I think it was an attic. No, it seems bigger than an attic. I can't remember exactly. I was young then. There might have been an attic on top of that. I can't remember. But yeah, I remember us living in a little room up there. I think at some point I had turned on the gas stove. One of my earliest memories, or I think I've been told about this too. Turned on the gas, and I think I got blown backwards at some point. I don't know if that was exaggerated. If you know my dad, he likes to exaggerate. Again, I said before, he convinced me he was in Creepshow. But yeah, I remember that. But I just remember, like, not just those, like, I don't have many memories of those times, obviously. But I have a few memories of visiting there whenever they'd gotten divorced. Because I lived with my mom, but I went to see him on the weekends, and of course the whole family there. And I've got videos, if you want to check out my YouTube. I've still got to upload the rest of them, but some classic stuff that I was doing. Playing guitar. Some videos of my dad. I also got some really early ones of my dad and my mom and my granny's at Christmas. But some of those memories, like, that's why I wish time machines could exist, so I could go back and just live in that time. Or maybe just observe, but I don't know. If I did that, if I went back and watched, I would be like, they're all gone now. Everybody that lived in the house but my mom is gone now. And that's sorry, I didn't mean for this to take a dark turn, but whew, I wasn't expecting that. Sorry. Yeah. So maybe it would be bitter. It would definitely be bittersweet if I went back just to observe all that. And so many memories made in that house, and I wish that I'd had more of them, because it's all about, like I said, my core age of memory is the mid-90s. These are stuff from the early to mid to late 80s, and I wish I had more memories of it. But yeah, that's where we were at. And then when we ended up moving during this time period we're talking about now, 1990, we lived in a bunch of different places. We lived in Kentucky, but this time I believe we were living in Mount Carmel, Ohio. And we were living in these apartment buildings, and I had my first crush around this time. No, that was a little bit later. I'm skipping ahead. Yeah, we were living with the granny at this time. Yeah. Sorry, as I'm putting stuff together in my head, I was like, this doesn't sound right. That's too late or too early for this stuff. Yeah, we'll get into Mount Carmel and my first crush when we get into 92. But in 1990, we were living with Granny, and I was going to, I think it was called Mercer Elementary, I think is what it was. Back when I went to school when I lived with my Granny. Well, I wasn't sitting in the woods. I liked school then. But yeah, this was before the days of Marky Foe. This is after the days of my brother Josh's dad. I'm probably not going to talk about him, because I literally have no funny memories of him at all, just all bad. But this was in between that times, like before we'd moved to Mount Carmel. And just, like I said, those memories of watching TV with my mom. Wish I had more memories of those times. Sorry, this kind of turned into a ramble fest. Some of the popular shows at this time, I'm going to run through these quick. I'm sorry I'm dragging on here. America's Funniest Home Videos, like I said, Bob Saget. they've had many hosts, but he was the one that started it and was most known for. And that was like, you had to watch that Sunday nights. America's Funniest Home Videos. Of course, today you can watch on YouTube and see all kinds of funny stuff, or on Facebook and the Reels and all that stuff. But at this time, this is the only time you can see home videos like of actual people and the stupid things they were doing. Alf was on reruns. It just finished their last season. Alf is a classic 80s show that, like I said, finished their last season in the 90s. Didn't really get an ending because they were supposed to have another season. It ends with him getting captured by the alien task force. And they went back and resolved that. Came out with the TV movie Project Alf. Cheesy, but it's hilarious. I need to get the full set of those DVDs. A couple of the other shows that were popular at the time were Matlock, which I didn't watch Matlock then. I watched it with my grandpa Wally later on after I moved in with him, which I'll have to do something in the future to talk about that, because that was in the 2000s. And maybe that's the idea for later on. But yeah, Matlock was Andy Griffith played this lawyer, and he was cranky, but of course he'd always ended up saving the day and getting his client off and finding the real killer. Of course, going back, I've taken, not to brag, but I've got a master's in criminal justice, so I know a little bit more about the way that the trials goes. And there was a bunch of stuff he did every week that would have gotten whoever eventually got convicted of that case would have gotten an appeal for it. But anyway, you don't think about that then. And like I said, I wasn't even watching that then. That was old people TV. Well, I like old people TV now. Unsolved Mysteries. We'd all watch that. Robert Stack, the classic voice. The stuff on there would scare you. It's like, this stuff is still going on, and there, if the stuff's still going on, and a lot of it was murders, that means there's still murderers out there. That show did a lot of good. I seen a special a few years ago. A lot of things were solved thanks to that show. I don't know if that was originally their point, or if it was, good for them. We're going to move now quickly into sports. Of course, being summer, baseball was in the middle of it. Back then, Major League Baseball only had two divisions, the Western and the Eastern. And of course, I was aware of baseball then, but I really wasn't watching it much. I'd played t-ball in kindergarten, so it was a little bit before this. But like I said, I wasn't like I am now, where I know like all the stats. But the leaders of the AL East were the Red Sox, and the leaders of the AL West were the White Sox. Which is just funny to think that the White Sox in Chicago are considered the West. But the way baseball was then, you had East and West. Actually, I should say that the White Sox were tied with Oakland A's for the top of that division. And the NL East, the leaders were the Pirates. And in the West, that great city of Cincinnati where I'm from is in the West. But we were the leaders. And of course, this was 1990. So if you know anything about the Reds' history, this is the year we went, as they call it, wire to wire, which means we started the year in first place, and we're in first place the whole way, and we ended up sweeping Oakland in the World Series. At this time, we had a 9.5 game lead. And that was, of course, the last time we were in the World Series. I wish I would have been more present in knowing about baseball then, so I could have enjoyed that, because I didn't even know they won at that time, or at least I don't have memories of it. At least I may have known. Of course, almost 35 years later, we still ain't been back to the World Series, let alone won one. We got good chances this coming up year. The time to strike is now. Sorry, that's now though. But a lot of no-hitters were actually thrown this year. Back when they let pitchers actually pitch and not take them out after 80 or 90 pitches, because some stat says this. Not to mention, not to get on a rant here, but pitchers today the emphasis is on the fastball and how fast you can throw it. That's why people throw their arms out. Not because how many innings they pitch. If they pitch, I'm not saying they had to pitch slow, but if they weren't trying to pitch 100 miles an hour every single throw, they could last a whole game. But anyway, Randy Johnson threw a no-hitter on June 2nd. Of course, Hall of Famer. Talk about Hall of Famers. Nolan Ryan threw his 6th no-hitter this month. And then on June 29th, for the first time this happened in, 2 no-hitters in separate leagues on one day. Dave Stewart and Fernando Valenzuela, who recently died for the Dodgers, they both threw no-hitters. So 4 no-hitters in the month of June. And nowadays, we're lucky if you get 2 a year, if we get that. But also during this time, baseball announced the idea that they're going to expand in 1993 for 2 more teams, and that would become the Colorado Rockies and the Florida Marlins. Miami Marlins now, I guess. Yeah, but the expansion would be coming, and I think that might have been when they changed the layout of the leagues. 'Cause I like the way it is now better, where you're separated. You don't have the East and West because, face it, Chicago and Cincinnati are not West. Especially when you have teams in California. But the more they expanded, the more they realized they needed to divide the leagues up. But another big thing that happened in baseball that would have huge implications is Atlanta Braves manager Russ Nixon was replaced by Bobby Cox, who was the general manager of the Braves at that time. And of course, everybody knows Bobby Cox took them to their highest levels. I mean, the Braves went from a team that lost all the time to the team of the 90's. I mean, let's just say it how it is. They were the team of the 90's. And I believe it all started right there with that move. Quickly going into NASCAR, just take a look at the stuff that happened. Derek Cope won the Budweiser 500 from Dover. Rusty Wallace won the Banquet Frozen Foods 300 from Sonoma. I love NASCAR and their sponsors. Some of them are hilarious. Here's a weird one. Harry Gant won the Miller Genuine Draft 500 from Pocono. And next week, Dale Earnhardt won the Miller Genuine Draft 400 from Michigan International Speedway. So apparently Miller they're like, okay, how are we going to beat Budweiser? We'll sponsor 2 races back to back. But anyway, Dale Earnhardt ended up going on to win his 4th championship that year. And in the NBA, the Detroit Pistons beat the Portland Trail Blazers to win the NBA Finals, the NBA Championship. That was back-to-back years for them. Wasn't too much going on in the news. During this time was the name Dr. Kevorkian became known. He was a doctor that was helping people kill themselves. And of course, I'm not going to talk about one way or the other for that. I try not to keep those issues on here. This is just supposed to be a fun look back, not make people argue over this. But that was when that started, and throughout the 90s, I'm gonna get Dr. Kevorkian. If you heard that from anybody, maybe it's just my weird friends. It's cool. But another thing that I found surprising, the Supreme Court ruled that checking for drunk drivers is constitutional. So I guess before that it wasn't. That's a weird thing to think these days, that there was a time where police couldn't check to see if people were drunk driving. I mean, of course, back in those days, you didn't have to wear a seatbelt either. Some cars didn't even have them. But just a weird, like, the way to look at it is now, like now, just the slightest probable cause or car weaving, and the police have the right to check you. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, they need to be checking for drunk drivers because it has been proven that driving impaired on anything that impairs your mind is not good, because, I mean, not only can you yourself die, you kill others. And this has been my after-school special moment. But anyway, that was pretty much just what was going on in the news at the time. We're going to be winding up here. We're going to talk about wrestling. No actual WWF news, because if you remember this time, they just had the 4 pay-per-views: the WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, and SummerSlam. Well, this was in June. Of course, later on they would add King of the Ring as a yearly thing, but it wasn't. That didn't happen until '93. So no WWF news. They were coming off, I guess to give you a little bit on them, they were coming off WrestleMania 6, the huge match with the Ultimate Warrior defeated Hogan, and they were headed towards SummerSlam. But WCW didn't have a pay-per-view either, but they did have Clash of the Champions. If you've never seen Clash of the Champions, it was a network special back then when they didn't do those. A primetime network special on TBS. Nowadays, that's Raw and AEW or whatever, each week. That's a soapbox here, but that's, things aren't as special. Like Clash of the Champions, that was like, oh, Clash of the Champions is on, because it wasn't every week either, and sometimes it wasn't even every month. But you knew when Clash of the Champions was on, I was like, I gotta watch this, because they'd be advertising on WCW Saturday Night, they'd be advertising it on their other syndicated shows. But this was Clash of the Champions 11, Coastal Crush. The main event of the show saw Junkyard Dog would beat Ric Flair for the NWA World Champion Ric Flair, but he didn't win the title because it was disqualification. Because of course it's a Ric Flair match. Ric Flair, my favorite of all time. But looking back at this, it really became one match that stuck out really in particular. Even though it was Clash of the Champions, there was only a few titles on the line. Originally, it was meant to be all titles on the line. They got away from that. But anyway, on this night, Mean Mark, as he was known, Mean Mark beat Brian Pillman. And of course, Mean Mark, everybody knows, Undertaker. I got this hat at his One Dead Man show. If you ever get a chance to go to that, it's great. He was literally drunk this night, like the whole night telling the stories, and you could tell, but it was fun. But yeah, this was one of the last appearances. He was known in WCW as many things. Mean Mark Callis is the one he was known most as. He came in as one of the skyscrapers when they needed. Yeah, was it Sid Vicious or Dan Spivey that he replaced? I can't remember right now. Anyway, like I said, this is one of his last appearances for WCW. He'd kind of seen the writing was on the wall and knew, just like later on with Steve Austin, they had so many stars that if they could have just gotten, and then again they couldn't, he became the Undertaker in WWF. They wouldn't have done that in WCW, and if they had, they would have made it so hokey, like when they had Kevin Nash dressed as the freaking Wizard of Oz. I mean, come on. But I mean, what WCW had at one point. But like I said, later on this year, in November, he would go on to become The Undertaker to debut at Survivor Series. And so this was one of his last, not his last, but one of his last WCW appearances. Yeah, like I said, got this hat. I definitely recommend the One Dead Man show, whether he's drunk or not. But yeah, that's just a look back to the 1990s, back at the first year of the 1990s. I hope you... Let me do this thing over again. Yeah, that was our look back at June of 1990. This is the earliest we've done one of these on. Of course, whenever I do January 1990, that will be the earliest possible. But next week, we're going to jump ahead not too far. Still going to be in the early 90s. We're going to go to February of 1993. See what's going on in the world. By that time, yeah, I was 9 years old then. I believe we were living with Marky Foe in Norwood then, in the early days of that. So maybe we'll get into a little bit of that. But just let me know your feedback, guys. Coming soon around Christmas time. I haven't even planned it out fully yet. I'll have another bonus episode with my wife just talking about our Christmas memories. Memories we had of stuff we got, of family gatherings, of just different stuff like that. Won't go too much on the toys, but maybe a few presents we had. Stop, guys. The dogs are trying to kill each other, apparently. They won't make it off here. But, and just some of the Christmas stuff we loved watching then, and just traditions we had. We can talk about each, family's tradition and everything. But that'll be a fun one for the future. But thank you guys for checking us out here on the podcast. Like I said, I guess I'm going to get back in this time machine and head back to my own time period. Next time, I'll see you in 1993.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins. Where every